I'm Samantha Whitaker, 35, and I spent over a decade building Stratavolt Systems from the ground up. So when I got a message from my brother, Kyle, expect a call from our attorney, my stomach sank. The company I had built from my living room in Spokane, Washington, the one I gave my family generous shares in while keeping 51% for myself, was being ripped out from under me. I stared at the screen, hands cold, heart pounding. Then, without a word to anyone, I typed back, "Understood. They thought I'd roll over. They had no idea what I was about to do. Before I tell you how I flipped the script on the very people who betrayed me, tell me where you're tuning in from. And hit that subscribe button if you're ready for justice, served cold." Back in 2011, I was 21, fresh out of Boise State with a degree in computer science and nowhere to go. The job market was brutal, and I racked up 57 rejections in 3 months. I realized I couldn't wait for someone to hand me a shot. I had to make one. My first office was a busted folding table in my aunt's basement. My seed money? $3,800 scraped together from tutoring high school math and fixing neighbors' Wi-Fi. I lived on instant noodles and dollar coffee, crashing on an air mattress beside a tangle of wires and whiteboards. I coded like a maniac, often 18 hours straight, sometimes dreaming in lines of JavaScript. My parents, kind but skeptical, would ask gently, "Sam, maybe it's time to think about a steady job?" I'd just smile and say, "I'm close." For months, there was nothing. No customers, no revenue, only declining credit scores and empty bank accounts. Then it happened. I launched our first product, a sleek, intuitive workflow system for independent contractors. Unlike bloated enterprise tools, mine was cheap, clean, and fast. The day our 10th customer signed up, I took myself out for tacos, my first non-microwaved meal in ages. It tasted like hope. Growth followed, fast. I hired Mateo, a genius front-end dev I met at a local hackathon, and later, Priya, a former barista with a golden voice for customer support. Stratavolt wasn't just a business anymore. It was my home, my history, and my heart. So when my brother tried to push me out of the very thing I created, he underestimated me. Big mistake. For the first time in years, I could sleep more than 4 hours without fearing the company would collapse overnight. When we reached our 100th paying customer, I signed a lease on our first real office. One cramped room above a pizza joint on East Main. It always smelled like pepperoni and burnt crust, but it was ours. That's when I made the decision that would, unknowingly, become the crack in the foundation. I brought in my family. My younger brother Kyle had just finished his MBA and seemed like the perfect fit to manage our finances as we scaled. My older sister Lacey, with her polished background in brand strategy, jumped in to help grow our marketing. And my cousin Derek, a smooth-talking sales rep from Seattle, joined to boost client acquisition. I gave each of them 10% equity. Generous, in hindsight, but I retained a 51% controlling share. The remaining 19% was split between early hires and angel investors. "This is huge, Sam," Kyle told me the day he signed. He hugged me like we were still kids sharing secrets under blankets. "I'll never forget what you've done for me." "We're building a legacy," Lacey had added, eyes gleaming. I wanted to believe her, and for a while, it was magic. Our small contractor software blossomed into a full suite of business tools, automated invoices, real-time scheduling, client tracking. Our user base grew from hundreds to thousands. Revenue shot from $500,000 to $10 million in less than 3 years. We moved offices 4 times, finally settling into 3 floors of a glass tower overlooking Riverfront Park, the Stratavolt name etched proudly on the entry plaque. I still arrived before sunrise and left long after dark. Even with a growing team, I couldn't stop grinding. It was in my bones. Meanwhile, my personal life shrank. I missed friends' weddings. Birthdays went forgotten. Dating existed only in between launches, until Brian came along. He was steady, supportive, the kind of man who didn't compete with my ambition. "Build your empire," he'd say with a smile. "I've got your back." Looking back, I think Brian saw what I didn't. The quiet shift happening around me. Kyle began hinting at restructured roles, cutting me out of key decisions. Lacey said my intensity worried some clients. Derek floated the idea that my deep technical focus was holding the brand back. "Let us handle the business side," Kyle said one afternoon in a leadership meeting. "You look tired, sis." I laughed it off. They were my family. What could go wrong? But then came the dinner with Tricor Solutions, and everything started to unravel. They were potentially our biggest client yet, a national retail chain looking to completely overhaul their digital infrastructure. After 3 months of demos, custom proposals, and virtual walkthroughs, this dinner was meant to be a mere formality before signing a 7-figure contract. I arrived early at Willow and Pine, the upscale bistro downtown, reviewing final talking points with our team. 15 minutes later, Kyle strolled in with Lacey and Derek in tow. One look told me something was off. They were mid-conversation and immediately went quiet when they saw me. "Sorry we're late," Kyle said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Last-minute prep." Throughout dinner, I led the discussion with the Tricor executives, walking them through our phased implementation strategy and the technical specs they'd asked for. But every time I laid out a point, Kyle interjected. "What my sister means is," he'd say. Or, "While Sam handles product development, our executive team has been mapping a broader growth plan." By the time dessert arrived, I felt like a spectator at my own pitch. When Tricor's CEO asked about our 5-year expansion vision, Kyle jumped in confidently. "We're positioning Stratavolt to target the enterprise-level market," he said. "The small business segment Sam originally built for served its purpose, but we've outgrown that approach." Outgrown my vision? I nearly dropped my fork. That was the first I'd heard of completely pivoting away from the market that built us. In the car ride back to the office, I asked the question burning in my chest. What was that comment about ditching the small business market? Kyle glanced at Lacey in the back seat before shrugging. "It's just business talk. Tricor wants to see ambition." "That's a massive shift," I said flatly. "You don't just decide that without looping in the CEO." "You've been really tied up in product work," Lacey offered. "We didn't want to overload you with more meetings." Overload me? I bit my tongue. Later that night, still rattled, I stayed behind at the office. Around 9 p.m., heading to the break room, I heard voices in the conference room. The door was slightly ajar. "She's brilliant with tech," Lacey was saying, "but honestly, she's becoming a liability in front of clients, too emotionally tied to the original model." "We need someone more flexible," Derek added. "The board's asking if it's time for new leadership." The coffee cup shook in my hand. The board? Since when were my family members speaking to the board without me? In the following weeks, red flags multiplied. Calendar invites that showed up after meetings ended. Key decisions made without my input. "Sorry, last minute," they'd say. But I knew better. They were moving behind my back. Hiring decisions for senior roles or expansions into new markets were suddenly announced as done deals, with my input reduced to a polite formality. "We just need your final sign-off, Sam," they'd say, sliding a folder across my desk as if I'd already been consulted. When I pushed back, Kyle would sigh like I was being difficult. "We talked about this last week, Sam. Don't you remember?" The worst part was, I started to doubt myself. Had I forgotten? Missed something? I'm an engineer at heart, so I started keeping meticulous notes, conversations, dates, decisions, just in case. But the gaslighting grew bolder. It wasn't just subtle anymore. It was overt. I began questioning my memory, my instincts, even my sanity. The stress hit hard. I dropped nearly 15 pounds in 2 months. My sleep turned into shallow naps between 3 a.m. panic spirals. I developed a persistent eye twitch that concealer couldn't hide. Video calls were the worst, seeing my drawn face, eyes rimmed with fatigue, jaw clenched like I was holding back a scream. Brian noticed. Of course he did. "You need to confront them," he told me one night as I moved broccoli around my plate. "This is your company, Sam. Don't let them spin it until you forget that." He was right. The next morning, I called Kyle into my office and closed the door. "I need to know what's going on," I said flatly. "I'm being excluded from meetings. Decisions are made without me. And I overheard a conversation about replacing me as CEO. He blinked, clearly caught off guard, then slipped into a cool, practiced expression. "You're being paranoid," he said. "You're under a lot of pressure. Maybe it's just getting to you." "Don't gaslight me, Kyle. I know what I heard." He leaned forward, concern painted on like stage makeup. "We're worried about you. You've seemed off. The company's bigger now, more complex. Maybe you need a break, a sabbatical." The word landed like ice water. A sabbatical. A quiet way to push me out without a fight. Amanda and Derek said the same thing later that week. Warm voices, sympathetic tones, a rehearsed chorus. "You need rest, Sam. We've got this." It felt like I was trapped in some twisted psychological thriller, everyone around me smiling while pulling the floor from under my feet. In one last attempt to rebuild trust, I tried easing up. I gave Kyle public credit for initiatives I'd started. I let Lacey lead pitch meetings. I approved Derek's sales plans without much scrutiny. It didn't help. The closed-door meetings continued. The silences when I walked into rooms. The glances. Something was coming. I could feel it. But I still had 51%. They couldn't take that away, could they? The San Francisco trip wasn't supposed to end early. I'd flown out for a 3-day tech conference. Part networking, part reconnaissance. A chance to meet potential partners and quietly observe our competitors. But by the second afternoon, a migraine slammed into me like a freight train. Even after meds and hours in a dark hotel room, the pain pulsed behind my eyes like a warning. Quietly, I booked an earlier flight home. No one needed to know. By the time my Uber pulled up to the Stratavolt building in downtown Spokane, it was nearly 8 p.m. I expected the place to be dead quiet. Maybe a few developers hunched over code with earbuds in. But the lights in our main conference room were blazing, and Kyle's, Lacey's, and Derek's cars were all in the lot. That wasn't normal. I slipped in through the side entrance using my key card and padded quietly down the hallway. As I approached the glass-walled conference room, voices filtered out, too focused to notice me. "The documentation is solid," Kyle was saying. "We've got every instance logged where her decisions cost us money or chances to scale." "But she still holds 51%, came the voice of Bernard West, one of our longest-standing board members. "We can't just oust her unless she agrees." "That's where this comes in," Derek replied. "Our attorney found a clause in the original incorporation documents. If the majority of the board finds the CEO is harming the company's interests, they can authorize a new share issuance. It would dilute her equity." My breath caught. They weren't just trying to demote me. They were trying to erase my ownership. "She's lost perspective," Lacey chimed in, still acting like Stratovolt's a scrappy little startup. "We've outgrown that." "She's brilliant with engineering," Kyle said, "but she's holding the company back. The board needs to lead now." "And you're confident these performance concerns will stand scrutiny?" asked Diane Chambers, another board member I'd once trusted. "We've documented everything," Kyle said calmly. "Missed meetings, client feedback, moments where she resisted key pivots. It's all in the file." I heard papers shuffling, proof of their plan. 10 years of my life, now reduced to bullet points in a case against me. "What about legal backlash?" Bernard asked. "She won't go down quietly." "That's why we brought in Patricia," Derek said. A new voice entered, cool and clipped. "I specialize in complex leadership transitions," she said. "We have multiple avenues to restructure control with minimal exposure." I backed away, heart pounding. They weren't just planning to push me out. They were coming for everything. "The share dilution is one route," Patricia said smoothly. "We've also identified potential breaches of fiduciary duty we could leverage if necessary." Breaches of fiduciary duty? I had done nothing but bleed for Stratavolt, sacrificed years, health, and relationships to put the company first. "And the timeline?" Diane asked. "We're ready to move now," Kyle answered without hesitation. "Everything's in place. The documentation is solid. We'll call for an emergency board meeting next week, present the case, and vote. Once the board approves the share issuance, we notify Sam." "And by the time she gets legal counsel involved," Patricia added, "it'll be finalized. She won't be able to reverse it easily." "She'll be upset," Lacey said in a tone rehearsed to sound like compassion. "But we'll offer a generous exit package and a ceremonial title." Founder and technical advisor, or something like that, Derek added. She did start the company, Bernard said quietly, unease creeping into his voice. Are we absolutely sure this is necessary? The company has outgrown her, Kyle said flatly. She's not scaling with it. This isn't personal. It's business. Not personal? My own brother, sister, and cousin were scheming to take the very company I created, and it wasn't personal? Every word scorched. Part of me wanted to crash through the door, watch the color drain from their faces as I confronted them. But the side of me that had survived grueling startup years, scraping through loans, sleepless nights, relentless rejection, knew better. Information is power, I reminded myself. And right now, they didn't know what I knew. I backed away from the conference room silently, returned through the side door, and walked down the block to where I'd parked. Only then, alone in my car, did the tears fall. 10 years. A decade of vision, sacrifice, and stubborn hope, shaken to its core. My company, my family, and now, betrayal. Eventually, when I had nothing left to cry out, I drove home. As I pulled into my parking spot, my phone buzzed. A message from Kyle. Expect a call from our lawyer. So, they were accelerating their plan. Maybe someone had spotted me. Maybe not. It didn't matter. What mattered now was how I'd respond. I barely remembered unlocking my door. Brian met me at the entrance, eyes scanning my face. He knew something was terribly wrong. I collapsed on the couch, phone still in hand, and told him everything in a voice I barely recognized as my own. They can't do this, he said, pacing. You own Stratavolt. They found a loophole, I murmured. Some clause that lets them dilute my shares if they claim I'm harming the company. That's absurd, he snapped. We'll fight it. And for the first time, I started to believe we could. You are the company's interests. Brian's voice echoed in my ears, but my thoughts had already surged past the panic. The initial shock was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I reached for my phone. I need to call Rachel. Rachel Solomon had been my personal attorney for years. She'd helped draft our original incorporation papers and negotiated our earliest contracts. When we built an internal legal team, she graciously stepped back. But now I knew exactly who that team answered to. And it wasn't me anymore. It was nearly 10 p.m., but Rachel picked up on the third ring. Sam, what's wrong? I hit speaker and laid it out in clean, controlled language. No emotion, just facts. Those ungrateful little... She cut herself off. Sorry, let me think. I could practically hear her flipping through legal precedents in her mind. First thing tomorrow, I need your incorporation docs, bylaws, board resolutions, everything. If you still hold 51%, then technically, you're in control. They can't call a board meeting without you unless you authorize that structure. They mentioned some clause about dilution if I'm harming company interests. There are provisions like that sometimes, she said slowly, but they're hard to enforce, especially against a founder. What's their evidence? They've built a file, skewed or exaggerated. Missed meetings, client concerns, delayed decisions. It's mostly fiction. And this emergency board meeting? When? Next week. But Kyle just texted. Their lawyer might contact me sooner. Then we move faster, Rachel said firmly. What's your goal, Sam? Fight to stay, or walk away with what you deserve? The question hit hard. I hadn't let myself consider the possibility that staying might not be viable. Stratavolt had been my everything, my identity, my pride, my purpose. But working with the people who plotted behind my back? I need to think, I said softly. After the call, silence filled the room. Brian sat beside me, his hand covering mine. I stared at nothing, trying to accept the reality. My company, hijacked by the people I loved most. The betrayal felt like a blade pressed between my ribs. What do you want to do? Brian asked gently. I closed my eyes. If I stayed, the fight would be brutal, public, endless. Even if I won, the damage might be permanent. And I'd be leading a company alongside people I could never trust again. I think I need to let go, I whispered. The words tasted like defeat, but on my terms, Not theirs. Sleep never came. Instead, I planned, researched, prepared. They thought they'd written the ending, but I was about to rewrite the entire story. By dawn, running on caffeine and adrenaline, I had my answer. For years, our closest competitor had been Corsin Solutions. While Stratavolt specialized in small to mid-sized businesses, Corsin dominated the enterprise market. Their software suite complemented ours almost perfectly. Minimal overlap, maximum potential. They'd floated merger ideas in the past. I'd always declined, fiercely protective of Stratovolt's independence. But independence wasn't an option anymore. At 6 a.m., I picked up the phone and called Jonathan Grant, Corsin's CEO. We'd crossed paths at industry events, always cordial, respectful. Sam? His voice was groggy but alert. Everything okay? It's pretty early. I need to meet today, privately. It's about an acquisition opportunity. A beat of silence. Go on. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at the Grand Hotel at noon? The bar is quiet, and no one in our field frequents it. Another pause. I'll be there. By 8 a.m., Rachel was at my apartment, legal binders in hand and fire in her eyes. We went through every contingency, every valuation model, every potential angle Jonathan might play. At noon sharp, we arrived at the Grand Hotel. The bar was dim and nearly empty, just as I'd hoped. Jonathan was easy to spot. Tall, silver hair perfectly in place, wearing a crisp navy suit. He raised an eyebrow when he saw Rachel, but gave us both a respectful nod. I assume this is serious, he said once we were tucked in a quiet corner booth. You've brought counsel. I didn't flinch. I'm selling my shares in Stratavolt, all 51%. I want Corsin to buy them. His expression barely shifted, just a flicker of surprise in his eyes. May I ask why? Last time we spoke, you made it clear you'd never give up control. Circumstances have changed, I said evenly. Are you interested or not? He leaned back, measuring me. Of course I'm interested, but I need to know what I'm buying. Anything I should be concerned about? Rachel jumped in smoothly. Stratavolt is financially strong, with year-over-year growth and a robust client base. This is a personal decision for Samantha. Jonathan's eyes stayed on mine. Family trouble? I said nothing. My silence was answer enough. The terms include retention of all current employees, I continued, except for 3 executives, Kyle Whitaker, Lacey Martin, and Derek Shaw. Severance arrangements can be handled post-acquisition. Realization dawned on his face. He nodded slowly. I see. We spent the next hour in careful negotiation. Jonathan was sharp but fair. By 2 p.m., we had a handshake deal. $75 million for my 51% stake, with the Stratavolt brand retained as a Corsin division, and my legacy, finally secured on my terms. Kyle, Lacey, and Derek would be removed from their executive roles, each with a severance package that was fair, generous, but not extravagant. One key condition governed the entire deal: total confidentiality until closing. No leaks, no board notice, no warning to my family or even my closest team. If word got out, the deal could unravel. We can fast-track this, Jonathan said. Contracts by morning, funds wired by noon. Perfect, I replied, feeling a strange, serene detachment now that the decision was made. And Jonathan, thank you. He shook his head lightly. Don't thank me. It's a smart move for Corsin. I just regret that it comes at such a personal cost to you. That night was the longest I can remember. I lay beside Brian, staring at the ceiling, walking through every step of the last decade, every hard-earned milestone, every sacrifice. The garage turned office, the ramen dinners, the holidays I missed, the family I trusted and invited into my dream, and the betrayal that poisoned everything. You sure about this? Brian asked in the dark. Yes, I said, voice steady. They made sure I didn't have a choice. At 7 a.m., I met Jonathan and both legal teams at his attorney's office. The documents were thick but precise. Each signature felt like a funeral and a rebirth. At 11:58 a.m., Jonathan's phone buzzed. His banker confirmed the transfer. It's done, he said quietly. I nodded. The press release goes out at 2? Yes, my comms team has it covered. We'll handle everything from here. I thanked Rachel with a hug, shook Jonathan's hand, and stepped out into the brilliant midday sun. For the first time in 10 years, I had no meetings, no deadlines, no fires to put out, just space. I unlocked my phone and pulled up Kyle's text from the night before. Expect a call from our lawyer. I smiled faintly. After a moment, I typed a single word. Understood. Then I drove to the Stratavolt building one final time. It was noon, lunch hour. I knew Kyle, Lacey, and Derek would be at their usual spot downtown, probably rehearsing their coup between bites of overpriced sushi. The irony made me chuckle. I swiped my keycard one last time, walked through the lobby, and into my office. It felt smaller somehow, quiet, almost sacred. I packed only what mattered. A photo with my first 3 hires, the framed Founders Award from year 1, and a chipped ceramic mug that read, Code, Coffee, Repeat. Everything else could stay. They wanted my company, but they would never take my story. So little to carry for so many years of my life. As I walked out, I gave a small nod to the receptionist behind the front desk. Have a good day, Tara. She smiled, unaware of the tectonic shift that had just occurred. You too, Miss Whitaker. I gently set my keycard on her desk. I won't be needing this anymore. By 1:50 p.m., I was seated at a corner table in a quiet cafe 3 blocks away, nursing a cappuccino that had long since gone lukewarm. My hand rested lightly on my phone, waiting. At exactly 2 p.m., the screen lit up with a news alert. Breaking. Corson acquires controlling stake in Stratavolt Systems. It was official. 3 minutes later, the calls began. Kyle's name appeared first. Decline. He called again. Decline. Then Lacey. Then Derek. Decline. Decline. Then came the texts. Kyle. What the hell did you do? Call me now. Lacey. Sam. Please tell me this isn't true. Derek. You can't do this. Not to us. Not to your own family. That last one nearly made me laugh aloud. Family? They hadn't acted like it in years. I silenced the phone and finished my drink in peace. Then I walked to the boutique hotel I'd booked the night before. I knew better than to be home when they inevitably showed up at my apartment, banging on the door with demands and denials. By the time I checked in and got to my room, I had 17 missed calls. By dinner, there were 25. My voicemail was filled with the voices of people unraveling. I curled up on the bed, ordered room service, and finally pressed play. Kyle's message came first. Controlled fury. What the hell, Sam? You sold your shares without even speaking to us. This is war. Call me back. Then Lacey, already crying. How could you do this? We're your family. You didn't even give us a chance. Please, call me back. Derek tried to sound calm, reasonable. Look, Sam, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. We need to meet face to face. As the facts settled in, the tones shifted from denial to panic. Kyle again. They're saying we're being terminated. You can't just do that. I have a signed contract. Lacey, nearly sobbing. Please, Sam. I have a mortgage, car payments. I need this job. Please, don't do this. And then Derek, mask off completely. You backstabbing bitch. You'll regret this. We're family. You don't do this to family. That one made me flinch, but not from guilt, from recognition. They'd never seen me as an equal, only a resource. But now, I was finally free. If you've ever had to reclaim your power after being betrayed by the people closest to you, tap subscribe, because the next chapter of my story is where healing begins. And revenge gets a quiet, calculated twist. I don't do this to family. That's what Derek had said. After everything they planned behind my back. Around 8 p.m., my phone pinged with an email from Jonathan. Sam, transition proceeding as expected. Your family members have been formally notified of the organizational changes. As predicted, they're not responding well. They've threatened legal action, but our attorneys are confident their claims hold no ground, given the clean documentation of the transfer. I've also arranged for extra building security, just in case. Let me know if you need anything. Jonathan. At 9:17 p.m., the front desk of my building called. Ms. Whitaker, your brother and sister are here. They're insisting on seeing you. They seem quite agitated. Should I send them up? No, I said calmly. I'm not available. Please ask them to leave. If they don't comply, contact the police. Understood, ma'am. I could practically picture the scene. Kyle, red-faced and shouting, Lacey in tears, demanding they just talk to me. It was the same playbook they'd used growing up. Family emergency. We need to talk. You owe us. Not anymore. By midnight, the calls began to taper. My phone displayed the final tally. 38 missed calls, 27 voicemails, 52 text messages, 10 years building a company, dismantled in a single day. A lifetime of family bonds fractured beyond repair. I should have felt devastated, but all I felt was exhaustion, heavy and total. And under that, the first flicker of relief. It was over. They couldn't reach me. They couldn't use me. Not anymore. The next morning, the tech media had pounced. Corson expands market share with strategic Stratavolt acquisition software competitors. Unite in surprise deal. Founder exits. Family ousted in quiet takeover. Jonathan called me just before noon. The transition team is in place. Your family members have been escorted from the building with their personal belongings. No incident. The rest of the leadership? I asked, surprised I still cared. Shocked, of course, but adjusting. Your CTO, Jesse, asked me to pass along a message. He understands, and he hopes you'll call when you're ready. That hit me. Jesse had been one of the first. He deserved more than silence. I will, I said quietly. Tell him thank you. Take care of yourself, Sam, Jonathan said. You did the hard part. I ended the call, staring out the hotel window as traffic moved below me. And for the first time in years, I took a deep breath. A clean break, a new beginning. For everything. It's business, Jonathan said quietly, echoing the same cold justification Kyle had used the day I overheard their plot. Though, for what it's worth, I think you made the right decision. They left you no choice. He was right, and the world seemed to agree. Throughout the day, the messages from my family trickled in at a slower pace, but their tone had shifted once more. Gone was the desperation. Now came the threats. Kyle, our attorney says we can challenge this sale. You had a fiduciary duty to notify the board beforehand. Lacey, the bylaws clearly require you to offer your shares to existing shareholders first. You violated company policy. We're taking this to court. Derek, hope your little power play was worth it. We're filing for an emergency injunction tomorrow. See you in court. I forwarded everything to Rachel. Her response was quick, direct, and exactly what I needed to hear. All empty threats. The transfer is legally binding. They're just scrambling now. By evening, I started receiving a very different kind of message from the people who actually mattered. Colleagues, clients, industry contacts, even a few competitors. Michael, one of our earliest enterprise clients, heard what happened. I've got your back. Whatever's next. Dana, my very first customer service hire. Industry won't be the same without you steering the ship. Let me know if I can help. Jesse, figured something big was happening when you canceled lunch last week. No judgment. Just say the word if you want to talk. These messages struck a different chord. They weren't bound to me by guilt or family name. They were bound by shared work, trust, and respect. They were the people who'd built something with me, who believed in what we built. On the third morning, a final email from Jonathan landed in my inbox. Sam, legal has confirmed that all attempted challenges have been dismissed. Your family's employment was officially terminated yesterday. Severance has been processed. Security will remain in place as a precaution, but there have been no further incidents. When you're ready to discuss what's next, I'd love to chat. Your voice still matters here. Jonathan, it was a generous offer, and I appreciated it, but I already knew. That door was closed. That chapter done. I reopened Jesse's message. I'm ready to talk. Coffee tomorrow? Then I opened the old family group thread. Holidays, birthdays, fake thinking of you texts. I typed slowly. I wish you all the best. Please do not contact me again. I hit send. No flourish. No explanation. Just a boundary. Sometimes closure isn't loud. It doesn't beg for attention. It's quiet. Final. And long overdue. I'll meet you at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. This is not negotiable. It was time to face them. One last time. The Riverside Cafe sat tucked into a quiet corner of downtown Spokane, overlooking the river and just far enough from Stratovolt's offices to avoid accidental run-ins. I arrived half an hour early and chose a table in the back corner with a clear view of the entrance. I asked the manager to keep nearby tables clear, and as a precaution, arranged for one of Jonathan's security team to sit casually at the bar. Kyle arrived first. Right at 2 p.m., of course. Always punctual. One of the few things I could say in his favor. His appearance, however, was far from polished. Shirt wrinkled, eyes shadowed, hair unkempt. He spotted me instantly and approached, jaw tight. "Sam," he said coldly, sliding into the seat across from me. Lacey and Derek arrived together a few minutes later. Lacey's eyes were red, her makeup uneven, and she clutched a tissue in one hand. Derek looked combative, tension radiating off him like heat. Once they were seated, a thick, tense silence settled over us. I let it linger, studying them. These people I'd once trusted more than anyone, who had planned my downfall like it was strategy, not betrayal. Finally, Kyle broke. "You called this meeting. What do you want?" I met his gaze. "I want to understand." His brow twitched. "I want to hear you explain, in your own words, why my own family decided to betray me." "Betray you?" Lacey's voice cracked, rising slightly. "You're the one who sold the company out from under us. Without warning. Without even a conversation." "Without warning?" I repeated, voice steady. "Like the one you planned to give me before you diluted my shares and forced me out as CEO?" Their faces shifted. Shock, then guilt, quickly buried beneath practiced defiance. "I don't know what you think you heard," Kyle started. "Stop," I said sharply. "I was there, Kyle." His mouth snapped shut. "I came back from San Francisco a day early. I heard everything in that conference room, every word, every performance concern you documented, every plan to invoke that clause to take control, every condescending remark about how the company had outgrown me." Lacey's face paled. Derek's hands clenched under the table. The truth hit them harder than I expected. "You misunderstood," Kyle muttered weakly. "It was just contingency planning." "No," I said. "It was betrayal, dressed up in business language. And the worst part? You were willing to burn everything for control you didn't earn." Now I was here to close the door, with no intention of ever opening it again. "Options," I repeated. "You mean the ones that involved stealing my company?" I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. One tap, and the recording began to play. Clear, sharp, unmistakable. Their voices spilled into the quiet cafe, the same ones I'd heard from just outside that conference room door. "The documentation is solid. We've recorded every instance where her decisions cost us money or opportunities. She's lost her vision. Stratavolt has outgrown her. Once the board approves the share issuance, we'll inform Sam. By the time she can respond legally, it'll be done." I stopped the recording. "Still want to claim I misunderstood?" Lacey broke first. Her lips quivered, and tears welled in her eyes. "We never meant to hurt you, Sam," she whispered. "We just thought the company needed to evolve. You were so resistant to change, so attached to the way things were." "My original vision," I replied evenly, "built a multi-million-dollar company out of a folding table and a second-hand laptop. That vision gave the three of you jobs, equity you didn't earn, and a future none of you would have had otherwise." "It wasn't personal," Derek muttered. "It was business." "No," I said coldly. "It became personal the moment you decided I was expendable. The moment loyalty meant less than leverage." Kyle leaned forward, voice tight. "And what would you call what you did? Selling us out to our biggest competitor? You got your payday while we lost everything." "I protected myself," I said firmly. When I realized my own family was planning to take everything I built. And you didn't lose everything, Kyle. You got 6 months of severance, full benefits, and glowing references. I let that sink in. Much better than the ceremonial title and empty desk you planned for me while you dismantled my company piece by piece. We would have taken care of you, Lacey whispered. You make it sound like we were heartless. I leaned back. You documented my mistakes, held secret meetings, built a case to erase me. Tell me, why? Was it about power, money, or did you really think I was holding the company back? Kyle stared at the table. It started with talk about how much faster we could grow without you slowing us down. And then it became a plan, Derek added, voice low. We got caught up in it. Lacey dabbed her eyes. It felt like we were finally in control, like we mattered. We convinced ourselves we were doing what was best for Stratavolt. And all you had to do, I said quietly, was sacrifice the person who made it possible. And for yourselves, I added, watching Lacey's face. She nodded slowly. Yes, she whispered. For ourselves, too. Derek, always the pragmatist, leaned forward, arms on the table. So, what happens now, Sam? Is there any way to undo this? To work something out? I shook my head. The sale is final. Corson owns controlling interest in Stratavolt. Your executive roles were eliminated the moment the transition finalized. Kyle's jaw tensed. And the shares? The 10% each we still hold? Still yours, I replied. At the acquisition price, they're worth roughly $14 million each. You're not destitute, Kyle. His expression barely flickered, but I caught the brief glint in his eyes. Even after everything, the money was what still mattered to him most. And you? Lacey asked quietly. Are you working for Corson now? No, I said. I'm done with Stratavolt, done with all of it. Just like that? Kyle's voice held disbelief. 10 years of your life, and you just walk away? I met his gaze without flinching. You left me no choice. I stood, reaching for my purse. I've said everything I came to say. Don't contact me again. Not for advice, not for reconciliation, not for anything. Lacey let out a quiet sob, but she didn't stop me. Kyle's face had turned to stone, pride thick in his silence. Derek looked thoughtful, calculating, as if mapping his next career move already. As I turned to leave, Kyle called after me. Was it worth it? He asked bitterly. Destroying your family for revenge? I paused at the door, then looked back one last time. I didn't destroy anything, Kyle. You did that the moment you decided a company was worth more than your sister. I held his gaze. I hope the money brings you joy. I truly do. Because now, it's all you have left. With that, I walked out into the bright Spokane afternoon. Each step away from that cafe felt like shedding something heavy. The weight of betrayal, of silence, of obligation. It was gone. The truth had been spoken. The ties had been severed. Whatever came next would be entirely my own. The fallout lasted for weeks. Industry blogs devoured the story with headlines like Family Feud ends in surprise tech acquisition and founder outmaneuvers internal coup at Stratavolt. Anonymous sources, former employees, maybe board members, fed the rumor mill. Some called me ruthless, calculating, a woman who sold out her own family for a payout. Others called me a survivor, a visionary betrayed by those closest to her. The truth? Like always, somewhere in between, and I was finally at peace with that. My family made several attempts to challenge the sale in court, but as Rachel had predicted, none of them gained traction. The paperwork had been airtight. The transfer to Corson was clean, indisputable, and completely legal. Within a few weeks, the lawsuits were quietly withdrawn. Through industry whispers and LinkedIn updates I couldn't help but glance at, I learned that Kyle had landed a CFO position at a mid-sized SaaS company in Seattle. It wasn't Stratavolt, but it was still respectable. Lacey had picked up consulting work with a few marketing agencies, leaning into her brand strategy credentials. Derek, ever the networker, launched a boutique sales training firm, already boasting 2 clients I recognized from Stratavolt's early days. They'd landed on their feet, just like I knew they would. The severance packages I negotiated for them had bought time. Their equity holdings, untouched in the sale, gave them long-term security. I hadn't destroyed them. I'd protected myself. As for me, I disappeared from the tech scene. No interviews, no panel discussions, no LinkedIn activity, no startup press. I needed to be invisible. That first month after the sale passed, in a haze of sleep, Netflix, and too many takeout containers, after 10 years of 18-hour workdays and relentless pressure, my body shut down. My mind followed. Rest wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity I had long denied. Brian became my tether. He handled the errands I forgot, made sure the bills were paid, and coaxed me gently to eat, shower, breathe. He didn't push. Not for answers. Not for plans. Just presence. "You'll know when it's time to think about what's next," he said one evening as we sat on our balcony, watching the sun dip behind the treetops. "There's no rush." He was right. With $75 million sitting across carefully diversified accounts, I didn't have to work ever again. The financial anxiety I'd carried since college, the clock always ticking, was gone. By the second month, the fog began to lift. I started therapy with Dr. Evelyn Winters, a quiet, perceptive woman who specialized in high-performance burnout and family estrangement. Our sessions twice a week became a lifeline. "What you're experiencing is grief," she said during one session. "You've lost your company, your professional identity, and your family at the same time. Of course you feel unmoored." "But I chose this," I said. "I sold the company. I cut the ties." "A choice made under threat is still trauma," she replied. "Choosing to protect yourself doesn't mean you won't grieve." Those words cracked something open. I let myself mourn. For the company I loved, for the people I trusted, for the version of myself I'd buried in boardrooms and betrayal. And slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. Coffee dates with college roommates, dinner with neighbors. Brian and I had barely spoken to despite living in the same Spokane building for nearly 4 years. Long phone calls with Aunt Linda, my mother's sister in Sedona, who was never entangled in the Whitaker family drama. "I always thought those siblings of yours were a bit too impressed with themselves," Aunt Linda said dryly when I finally told her what had happened. "Your mother would have been appalled by their behavior." My parents had passed years ago. Dad before Stratavolt was even an idea. Mom just as it started gaining traction. I'd often wondered if things might have gone differently had they still been around. Would their presence have tempered Kyle's ambition, Lacey's entitlement, or would they have joined the power play, seduced by influence and control like the rest? One crisp spring afternoon, about 6 weeks after the sale, an unexpected email arrived from Jesse. "Lunch next week? No agenda, just miss your face. Promise not to bring up your mysterious retirement unless you want to." I replied yes before I could second-guess myself. We met at a tucked-away bistro near Monito Park, well outside Spokane's tech orbit. The first few minutes felt stiff, two people skirting around a complicated shared past. But then we slipped into that old rhythm we'd built during long nights debugging code and planning product launches. "How's it been?" I asked eventually. "Working for Corson now?" Jesse considered, then shrugged. "Structured, polished, corporate in ways Stratavolt never was. But the team's intact. They've kept our development culture mostly untouched. Resources are good. Support's solid." He paused, then gave a small smile. "But they're not you, Sam. You were something else." I swallowed hard. Relief, maybe. Gratitude. "Thanks. That means a lot." He nodded. "What about you? Any regrets?" "About selling?" I traced the rim of my water glass. "It was the right call, given everything. But I regret letting Stratavolt become my entire identity. I regret not seeing what Kyle, Lacey, and Derek were doing until it was almost too late." Jesse didn't try to disagree. He just listened. That meant more than hollow comfort. "So, what's next for the brilliant Samantha Whitaker?" he finally asked. For once, the question didn't send my stomach into knots. I looked out toward the park's blooming dogwoods, a flicker of something returning. "I'm not sure," I said, "but I'm starting to have ideas." And I was. Little sketches in a notebook, conversations with people outside the tech bubble, a growing whisper of something new, something mine again. This time, on my terms. 6 months after selling Stratavolt Systems, I launched a boutique consulting firm in Spokane, focused on helping women navigate the harsh realities of the tech world. Not just building products, there were courses and accelerators for that, but safeguarding their vision legally, sustaining long-term growth, and maintaining decision-making power through each stage of funding. I kept it small. Just me, a sharp assistant named Callie, and a circle of seasoned professionals I could loop in when needed. No partners, no investors, no board of directors, definitely no family. The work fed my soul in a way Stratavolt hadn't in years, no longer chasing valuations, but helping others avoid the landmines I'd stumbled over. With part of the funds from the Stratavolt acquisition, I also founded a startup incubator, Ground Floor Ventures. Its mission was simple: support early-stage, women-founded tech companies with capital, mentorship, legal resources, and most importantly, a safe community. Within weeks, applications poured in, confirming what I'd always known. There were brilliant women with revolutionary ideas who'd been overlooked simply because no one believed in them first. Brian proposed on our 3rd anniversary. We were on our balcony, the same one where he once told me there was no rush to figure out what came next. He slipped a ring onto my finger and said, "I've seen you rebuild. Not just survive, but thrive. I want a future with that woman." We married 3 months later in a quiet ceremony, attended by our closest friends and Aunt Linda. Not a single Whitaker sibling in sight. For our honeymoon, we spent 2 months seeing the world. Rome's ancient alleys, New Zealand's fog-laced peaks, the brilliant chaos of Marrakesh. It was the kind of trip I'd never allowed myself before. Somewhere between time zones and sunsets, I received an email from Amanda. The subject line simply read, "When you're ready." I hovered over the delete button, but something, curiosity, or maybe a flicker of forgiveness, urged me to open it. "Sam, I don't expect forgiveness, or even a reply. I just needed to say, I'm sorry. Not for the consequences. I earned those. But for betraying you. For letting ambition smother gratitude and love. You gave us everything. And I tried to take it. I'm in therapy now. Finally. My therapist says I need to understand the jealousy I've buried for years. I always wanted to be you. And when I couldn't, I tried to take what you built. If someday you're open to coffee, I'd be thankful. If not, I'll understand." With regret and love, Amanda, I read it 3 times. Each word settled into a part of me still healing. Not healing the wounds. They would take far more than one email, but acknowledging them felt like an important beginning. That night over dinner, I showed Brian Amanda's message. "Are you going to respond?" he asked gently. "Not yet," I said. "Maybe someday, but not yet." Kevin and Kyle never reached out. Whether it was pride, denial, or simple lack of remorse, I couldn't say. And honestly, I didn't need to know. Some bridges collapse so completely, all that's left is the lesson they leave behind. A year after I sold Stratavolt Systems, I heard through industry contacts that things weren't going well. Jonathan had stepped down amid a leadership shakeup. The new CEO, brought in by Corson Solutions, focused aggressively on enterprise expansion, abandoning the mid-sized tech clients we had served so well. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Former clients were jumping ship, Jesse had moved on, and turnover across departments had soared. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sorrow for the talented people still there, a trace of vindication, and, most of all, distance. Stratavolt was no longer mine. And it hadn't been for a while. Ground Floor Ventures, on the other hand, had become something extraordinary. In its first year, we backed 12 female-led startups, 8 of which were already posting solid growth. My consulting roster stayed full, thanks to word of mouth and a network of women determined not to repeat my mistakes. At home, Brian and I were beginning to talk about family. It was the first time in my adult life I'd allowed myself to imagine a future that didn't revolve around funding rounds or quarterly KPIs. 2 years to the day after selling Stratavolt, I finally met Amanda for coffee. We picked a quiet cafe on the South Hill, neutral ground. She looked older, more grounded, her sharp edges softened by time, and, from what she shared, therapy. "Thank you for coming," she said, not pushing for more. "I'm not sure why I did," I admitted, but I meant it without malice. For 2 hours, we talked. Not about fixing what was broken, but about what we'd learned. About boundaries, and identity, and ambition. There were no apologies for the past that could erase what had been done, but there was honesty. As we stood to leave, Amanda asked, "Do you think you'll ever talk to Kyle or Derek again?" I thought for a moment. Maybe, if they understand what they did, not just regret it. She nodded. "They're still angry, still blaming you." "That's their burden," I said, stepping out into the sunlight. "I've let mine go." And just like that, I walked forward. Finally, freely, and fully mine. If you've stayed with me through this journey, thank you. Truly, it means more than you know. I never imagined I'd be sharing this story, let alone closing the chapter with peace in my heart. But here we are. I'd love to hear from you. Really, what would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever had to walk away from people you thought you could trust? What lessons did life teach you when everything familiar crumbled? Please, drop a comment below. Talk to me. Share your story. Whether it's a moment of betrayal, a hard-earned victory, or just a decision to finally put yourself first, your voice matters. And if this resonated with you, subscribe. Not for me, but for every woman or man who's ever had to fight like hell to reclaim their power. And if I can leave you with one piece of advice from all this, it's this: protect your peace like it's your legacy. Your time, your energy, your brilliance, they are not renewable. Surround yourself with people who see your worth without needing to diminish it first. And if those people turn out to be family, set the boundary anyway, because sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom.